Hey, everybody. It's Will Bell here with the Black Flag Podcast. Got the boys all here, Buddy and Sam and Brett Ballistics down there, and our special guest, the OKC Kid. Jose, man. Make us more smarter.
Make us more smarter. All right, is that the intro? Just go ahead and just go into it. You just
Yeah,
want me
bro,
to...
just put it in here.
No, I just
No,
fuck
for
with
real.
you.
Like I've been following along on your whole series here, and you have made me smarter about this whole thing and Timothy McVeigh and all the FBI agents crawling around this thing, and it's real creepy.
I would sorry, Will, I don't mean to interrupt, but I have like I would say we're all mostly good boys here. So when we get done with you, that doesn't sound good. What can we go tell our parents? Like, you'll never believe this. Check this out. Like, what's the juicy stuff?
Well,
like,
I mean,
I think that's like what most people are after. We don't need to go on the,
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I guess that's kind of the angle I went with. I think a lot of people are kind of like, especially the people that are really embroiled in the OKC stuff, especially people a little bit more like academic minded, seem to be more set on some of the stuff that are like bulletproof, like, sources or angles. Like John Doe 2 is what like a lot of people like my expert, Richard Booth. Yeah, that's his thing. It's John Doe 2. And I'm not saying at all he's wrong. He's right. I feel like like if you're dealing with academic people, journals, like journalism, etc., whatever, that is the angle. Because like John Doe 2 is like, I feel like that's one of the best angles to go for from that way. But I think if you're trying to get normal people interested in it, I think you kind of go with like the juicy stuff. Like, and I've been also kind of trying to make this like a meme sort of between, I initially obviously started out with Terrence Yeeki didn't kill himself. Because I think it's like the crazy deaths. Once you start showing the pile of bodies, and especially like Yeeki, and then also Trenadu, when you start actually, if you're able to get someone in and kind of suck them in with that hook of like, oh, this person, once you tell their stories also are so suspicious to the point to where you're like, any reasonable person goes, yeah, these people were murdered. Like they're so that is, I think for normal people, or if you're trying to like suck in an audience, like a large audience, like that kind of stuff, I think that's my opinion. I think I sort of got proven right.
Yeah, you did. It worked with me. That's what hooked me. I had no idea about him at all. And then just that video from our Jinx, like,
oh, he's still on Twitter. He's back on Twitter. He's back on Twitter.
Oh, I know. He followed me.
I thought that was like an RIP thing.
No, that was like he's a saint. We need him. But yeah, that was the first I've heard of it. I was just like, oh, that is. How do you defend that?
But yeah, I think what I was getting at with where I got vindicated with that angle, because I think, I mean, not a lot, but I think some people were kind of like, oh, he's kind of playing up this angle a lot. And I'm like, this is the angle. Like, especially for like me being like a podcast guy, I'm not an academic, I'm not a journalist. So like from that angle of the groups of people I'm working with, that's the angle. And I got vindicated because I mean, I'm sure maybe some of you are aware, or maybe you aren't, that, obviously I went on Timcast and I did, I wore the Terrence Yeeki didn't kill himself shirt. Actually, for those who are interested, Top Lobster made it. So you can
toplobster.com.
Yeah, toplobster.com. You can get that here. Terrence Yeeki didn't kill himself. I wore that on Timcast, and I did like a quick little blurb, like less than a minute, kind of in my intro. And then less than a month later, CNN actually did an article on Terrence Yeeki. Now, I want to be very clear. Initially, when it first started, I was like, did I somehow do this? And the more I've dug into it, I've talked to Richard Booth, my expert, and Richard kind of, I guess, talked to Scott, and he actually kind of passed back some of the feedback Scott gave, and you can tell by like the sources and also just the fact of the people he talked to, the manner of the type of investigative journalism that guy did. I think Thomas Lake is his name. You can tell like this took more than a month. So, but either way, like I said from the beginning that like I was very clear to people that like, I don't know, maybe something about the stuff I did had a part in it, influenced things that way. I don't know, maybe not. But either way, I think it shows that my finger was on the pulse of like where, like what is going on, what matters. I also think the OKC story at large right now, I've been getting a lot, not a lot, but some people be like, oh, why does this matter? And you're like, once you like start digging the story, you realize why it matters. There are people still in positions of power that had a part in different aspects of the story. It also tells you, it like informs you some of the stuff that's going on today between January 6th, like the Whitmer kidnapping plot, all sorts of like just basically the type of the what's the word I'm looking for, the way that the feds go about stuff, their general procedures, they don't really change much over time. They follow the same blueprints. So once you understand this, and it's something that's like far enough back in time to where we have accumulated a ton of sources, and it becomes like the accumulation of all the information has made it basically bulletproof that the official narrative is nonsense. So and it's also close enough in time to where it's like it's kind of spicy, because it's like there are people, like I said, still the nature of the individuals that are involved in this stuff, a lot of it's like deep state actors. And these are individuals that are a lot of them are still in power, or they're still in the similar jobs or have moved up the chain. Like Merrick Garland was who is I think the current AG, was the I think he essentially ran the prosecution against McVeigh, and there's some stuff there. You have Eric Holder was I believe he had some part in dealing with the FOIA lawsuits with or maybe it wasn't FOIA, but essentially some of the cover-up aspects of the trying to do stuff. Got Eric Holder. Robert Mueller, I think, was head of the FBI at some point during the trying to do stuff as well. So he also was kind of in the mix of that. So it's like once you start digging into these things, you're like, this is still pertinent. This still matters, even in that aspect. And even that aside, the individuals, like I said, it's like it informs you of things that, and if I can get someone to suck them in with like OKC, and it's like I can get them to be like, well, okay, well, what about January 6th? Like, isn't that kind of weird? Look at all these informants. Look at how this individual behaved. And once you can get them to, I feel like it's easier somewhat to get someone to buy into a story that's like decades past, because it's, for sure. But like a lot of normies will be like, oh, come on, the feds weren't involved in January 6th. But if I can get you like, hey, what about this story from 95? And if I can kind of like slip you in with that, then you're like, oh, and then you're like, okay, well, if they did that then, why wouldn't they do that now? Like you can kind of slip them in that way,
Show them the patterns.
Yeah, exactly. The patterns.
Yeah, I kind of did the same thing. Like with I had a libertarian event, and I showed them Waco rules of engagement, because I figured that would be the fastest way to red pill people, and just be like, and you'll see like Joe Biden and some of these actors in there just completely lying and asking dumb questions, even though they have all the evidence and stuff like that. So exactly. And you're watching all these people get killed and murdered. And so what is your where does this story start, in your opinion? What's the best place to start the story that's not
ooh boy.
I was thinking about this. So we know that on whatever day, the exact date, a Ryder truck was parked at the bombing, and then there was
April 19th, 1995. But go on.
They found like I think I was like in the 5th grade. Anyway, They found like an axle, and then so like I guess kind of maybe start there and how they were able to like figure it out so quickly, and then I maybe start from there, I guess. Like what we know and why that's not correct at all. What we were
You're
told.
right. It was April 19th, 1995. There was a Ryder truck parked in front of the Murrah building in Oklahoma City, which the Murrah building was like a federal building. It had, I believe it had I want to say it had like a Social Security or something like that. It also, the most notable thing, but they had an ATF in there, an ATF office. They had, like I said, the Social Security. I don't remember all the other stuff.
Did they have a daycare?
They had a daycare. Like the most pertinent things are the ATF and the in the daycare. But there were other different like offices, usually roughly kind of government-ish. Like I said, I think it was like a Social Security office or some shit. So probably a bunch of old people. But so like yes, you have that. And yes, so there was a Ryder truck parked in front of that. you know, the official narrative, and that's kind of how you always have to start out. It's like, what is the official narrative? Like that, like if you're doing like the spiel of like, you know, kind of what I'm doing here, usually you start with the official narrative and kind of work out from there. Now, if I'm just trying to shock someone, I start up, hey, Terrence Diegey didn't kill himself. Like if I'm just on social media or something, that's where I start. Or I mean, I could even do that like I don't know. That's typically in this format we're doing right now. You start there. But yeah, the official narrative is there was a Ryder truck parked in front of the Murrah building. I think it was roughly about 60 feet away. You know, Timothy McVeigh steps out shortly after, boom, blows up. It's a ammonium nitrate bomb, I believe, kind of like a fertilizer bomb, essentially. And boom, the building goes down. And then you come to find out you know, the official narrative being Timothy McVeigh is the one who blew it up.
Hang on now.
Ooh.
It blows up, and then who's the first on the scene? Like who?
One of the first, if not the first. I've seen first before, but I don't know if they mean that in like a literal first or if they mean that in like kind of like
First responder, like
well, I'm not even saying that. When you say like first on the scene, like was he first with a group? Was he like the fourth person? But like they were basically almost on there at the same time. You know
the
you
first
know what I mean?
wave.
Like,
Yeah.
So I hesitate to say first because I feel like that means I'm claiming he was the literal first person in there. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't.
No one's going to take anything we say seriously on this.
But he was one of the very first people there. Terrence Diegey. He showed up, was saving lives. You know, doing that. But I don't know if you wanted me to dig into that more because that kind of goes down.
I want to know all about Terrence Diegey.
Oh, Terrence Diegey? All right, yeah, he was well, you take me one angle, then another angle. All right, yeah.
I want to know about the heroes of the story.
Yeah,
Jose's got a great YouTube series. It's what you said, 10 hours long. So if anyone ever wants to like go in and dig into like everything, like it's great. It's a really amazing series.
We can get. I was like, we can get there. Like, we find out who it is. He gets tried. Blah blah blah. And then
all right. Do you want me to keep going with the official narrative or Yeeky?
Sure.
Just go wherever you feel. Go.
It's Sam's show. I'm sorry. I'm trying to.
We're all cool guys. Like that's kind of like Jose, you're getting at it. The official narrative was that that Timothy McVeigh parked his fertilizer bomb and walked out by himself. And then it blew up, destroyed the building that was 60 feet away. And how do you pronounce the cop's name? Yeeky. Him and other first responders came there, and you know, they saved a bunch of people. That was the official narrative.
So how do we know it's Tim McVeigh?
How do we know it's Timothy McVeigh? I mean, there's a lot to suggest it. I mean, not even suggest it. It basically is. I honestly got thrown off by that one because it's one of those things that's like so obvious that like there's not really any disputing that it was him. If you look at the
no. Like I'm just saying, like what does what does the news reporter tell us? Like, how do we find what does the narrative say? How did they find it was Tim
how
McVeigh?
did they find him?
Yeah, like all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
How they found him is basically I think it was some sort of pickup truck he escaped in of some sort. They found him without a license plate, pulled him over, some cop somewhere, I don't know the specific cop's name. He got pulled over. He weirdly like one of the weird parts of it is he like stepped out of the vehicle before even the cop came to him to like talk to him. And then I guess the cop discovered he had a concealed weapon, and I don't believe he had a concealed carry or anything like that. He had like a shoulder holster thing, so he could kind of see it bulging. But also the car didn't have a license plate on it, so that's what he got pulled over for. My thought, and I don't remember where I've heard this elsewhere, is that the logic behind why maybe he didn't have a license plate, because it does sound weird, was the idea is that it's kind of a dump car, like kind of like if you're trying to get away from some sort of crime, like you would get some sort of vehicle that you can just ditch somewhere and has nothing. So
it's not tied
like,
to you.
Yeah. Obviously, like I guess there is the inborn, like as we can see here, there's the risk of like some cop be like, why the fuck does that dude not have a license plate? But you would think like you get away quick enough, you don't get caught, you can just ditch that somewhere, move elsewhere. whatever, something doesn't tie to you. I don't know if that's exactly why, but that seemed to be a good explanation for me. But essentially, then they took him in. The cop didn't think that it was any way tied to it. And then at some point, I believe it was from eyewitness reports of seeing him throughout the day. Because like you said, you alluded to earlier, they found a piece of the axle. They were able to track it by the axle. They ended up going to the shop that they got it from. The person identified McVeigh. They also said there was another individual, which that's when we get into the John Doe 2 stuff.
Okay.
And that's how they tracked down McVeigh I believe by the sketch. No, actually, I believe he might have gave his name, if I remember correctly. I think he actually either gave his real name to the guy, perhaps. I might be wrong on that one. But yeah, they tracked him that way through the truck, through the shop that he went to, kind of the eyewitnesses. There also were plenty of other eyewitnesses that saw someone who looked just like him. And then as they're looking for him, I think it did take him a little while, not like super long. And then, while they're looking for him at some point, then somehow they figured out, Tadal, he was actually already in jail because he was from that. And I think it was one of those weird kind of things where they were actually literally about to release him when they found him. And so they had to call him like, don't release him. And then they got him. So that is the story of how we get to how they got McVeigh.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Do you think that was kind of like always, like he is definitely the patsy, like the FBI or the powers that be, whatever we want to
Lizard
call it.
people.
Yeah, the lizard people. Do you think that was the plan, like all along? Like,
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, like from my read, it's kind of hard to tell. You're kind of like trying to play mind reader there, but from just like my read of the situation, it looks like they did genuinely want to get away. There were seemed to be, when you dig in deep the story, it seemed to be there were steps that were taken to try to shield themselves from getting caught. I don't know. I really don't. Maybe not. I guess it really depends on how deep down the conspiracy rabbit hole you want to go, because it's like there is angles. There are things that seem to suggest maybe he was a government agent. I'm not saying that necessarily was the case. The only sources that comes from is him himself. So that is like kind of like, well, do you trust him? But now then once you start taking that piece of information from him and adding it to some other stuff, it gets a little bit more convincing, but it's also just as plausible he was saying that saying that shit, and just for whatever reason or another, I don't know why. I know it's hard to tell. It's hard to parse. But either way, like he either was a genuine like racist that was upset about the Waco, Ruby Ridge, all that, and he carried out acts of violence, or he was actually a full-on op. I don't know. It really is. It depends on how you want to interpret it. But
that's going to be my next question. So being young, I remember like finding out Tim McVeigh, far right, like whatever. And now as I'm older, hey man, we're all far right extremists. You know what I mean? Like, so like, is that true? Was he the part of this militia or something? Or is that not?
It was often convenient for them to use that as a way to discredit the militia movement. So
is that like that's.
Yes. There's two ways. Obviously, like I said, he made statements. I'll clarify that for the audience. He made, I believe, letters to his sister. I don't know if the letters went to his mother as well, but basically said to his, like, through some sort of correspondence to his sister, his mother. He also said it to his first, defense team. And I want to say as well to like maybe some other inmates that he was a government agent, essentially. The idea being they was sheep dipped because he did have a military service. I guess I can go to that for a minute. He was in Desert Storm. He was a veteran of Desert Storm. He joined in like the late 80s or some shit. I think he got out in like the early 90s, so he didn't stay in too long. He was in Desert Storm. There's also a lot to suggest he was basically a war criminal, like legit. He did some awful stuff there. But yeah, anyways, he kind of did his time over there in the Desert Storm. He came back. He tried to go special forces. The official narrative is he failed out, and it was due to having issues with his feet, from the training. And a lot of people, that may sound silly. I will tell you, for those who aren't aware, I did 11 years active duty military. I actually am it technically wasn't special forces, but I was a washout of something similar to that. And it was the training that we did is we literally rucked around with like 70, 80 pound bags on our back. And we would be trekking through like 8 to 12 miles through wilderness, up and down hills. And so if you were doing that kind of strenuous stuff, having feet issues really would be an issue. So go ahead.
My wife is a physical therapist for the military.
Yeah, there you go.
It's all the time.
Yeah, he had like a blister or something because he had new boots, I think was the story.
So, I don't know the specifics. I think the way I heard it was that he kind of, I don't think it was from new boots. I think the explanation was from his time over in Desert Storm. His feet just kind of, I don't know if it was blisters or what it was, but his feet weren't in the best condition, which, that is actually something they tell you when you're in training is like, take care of your feet. Like that is like the prime thing because they will get messed up if you don't take care of them. Fresh socks, fresh socks, fresh socks. Like
Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah. For real.
He did kind of drop the story of being, sheep dipped after a little while, suspiciously. Some people.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah, and what he said to his family, and like I said, his family, his mother, sister, his first defense team, and I like I said, I think to some extent, depending on the different aspects, the inmates, but primarily his defense team and his and his sister and mother. But he said, like I said, I was getting to he went to special forces, and the official narrative is he fell out because of the fee issues. Now, what he says is happened is, and by the way, that is legit. Like he did, like according to the official narrative, he did, he did go special forces. Like these are legit things. Yeah. But he like what he told other people is that they pulled him aside and said, hey, due to psychological tests, et cetera, whatever, what have you, one point, like why I mentioned the war criminal stuff earlier, he was a sadistic son of a bitch. So, he actually, I think, got some awards while he was in there. He very much was an order follower. Like
what's some of the specifics of like what you're calling war crimes?
Like shooting people, surrendering, just kind of taking glee, stuff like that.
Which war was this?
The Desert Storm. So, which is like a situation where we rolled into, I don't remember the specifics of the Desert Storm, but
it was like 3 days.
Yeah, we rolled into Iraq. We overpowered the hell out of them. It was one of those situations where we so overpowered them that majority of the time they just surrendered immediately. And so that was the kind of thing. It's like he would, just be straight up like killing them type thing. I believe he was a gunner in some sort of tank. So he was, but anyways, yeah, the point I was getting is kind of like, order follower, took glee in following the orders to an extent of, kind of going above it. So I could kind of see why maybe the Fed boys might be like, I don't know, this looks like a good one. But I don't know. Once again, do with this information what you will. I'm not saying one or the other because, I mean, it is kind of a strong claim to say he was sheep dipped. There's not really anything to confirm it aside from that. But like if you add in other stuff, it's like, I don't know, plausible. But he, like I said, then he got pulled aside. They essentially told him like, hey, we want you to do kind of like covert ops for us. Once again, coming through him, we want you to do stuff like one of the things they mentioned is you would be involved in helping the feds out with, I believe they said drug interdiction and also drug smuggling. So kind of a lot of people who fall or into this type of stuff know it's pretty much common knowledge at this point. The feds have for a long time done drug smuggling operations to be able to fund their off the books operations.
It's Snowfall.
Yeah, so
that's a great show about it. Like it's fantastic. It's a mainstream now. It was a conspiracy theory, and now it's like, oh no, it's like an award-winning show now. It's just everyone accepts it.
It's weird how that happens.
What?
Real quick, I want to finish it. And also, they said that that they want you to be essentially to start infiltrating, right-wing movements, militias. Okay. We want you to start, and he actually did try it against some militias, but it never seemed to stick. He technically wasn't in any militias, unless you want to consider the group of white supremacists that he ended up palling around with as militia. I guess you can, depending on how loose you're being with the term, I guess it's an armed group of individuals. I guess you can call it a militia, but it wasn't your conventional idea of like a militia. But yes, so and essentially he was supposed to create a legend of himself of being this disaffected, veteran that kind of hates the government, what have you. But yes, but sorry, go on. That's kind of all I want to get. Yeah.
So does the public, as we find out, we've got Tim McVeigh, we've got the murderer, and now poor Will, who is a blueberry farmer, he has to show his license whenever he buys fertilizer now or whatever. Was there any public interest in a John Doe number 2? Like, what was that? How known was the second suspect, and was it quietly hushed away, or was them hushing away suspicious? Like,
beyond suspicious. That's actually that's why John Doe 2 to some extent is such a big pings people's minds, because it is one of those things that's becomes public consciousness thing. I don't know. Obviously, I was very young when this happened. I was 4, but it was basically it occurred in April, and from April to June, it was basically one of the biggest manhunts in America is when they were searching for John Doe 2. That's actually, which maybe we'll get to Kenneth Rundu later, but he was actually essentially got caught up in that manhunt, mistaken for John Doe 2, and he ended up dead. But yeah, it was huge. John Doe 2 was huge. It was printed in newspapers everywhere. It was a big deal. John Doe 2. So if we're going to John Doe 2, it happened in April, and then they had basically the biggest manhunt in April, May, and then in May there was internal memos within the FBI where they said to put all inquiries or leads or whatever into John Doe 2 in abeyance, which what abeyance means is essentially don't pursue. We're not pursuing anymore. But this was behind the scenes. And then in June, the following month, they came out publicly and said they said they basically claimed there was no John Doe 2. That became their official narrative of the FBI, which is wild because over 20 witnesses saw them. And the funny thing is how they found John. One of the ways they went around finding McVeigh was through those same witnesses. So the idea is that, and most of these witnesses, or a lot of these witnesses, saw both of them. So they used these people to support their case for McVeigh. But then the idea is, oh yeah, no, you were fine. Your description of this individual is perfect. Blah blah blah. We'll take your word for this. But no, you imagine this other guy. This guy did not exist.
Is that because he's a Fed? Is that he's a Fed? Is that the thought?
Who knows?
I don't know. It seems there are things that imply that way because it seems to be that way, which I would say, because a lot of people will be like, well, why did they even do the manhunt? A lot of people will point at Kenneth Trenadu and be like, well, it seems the FBI killed him, and they were looking for John Doe 2. And one good point Richard Booth brought up in our series is that this entity is on a monolith. The people, let's say John Doe 2 was a Fed, there probably would only be a handful of people in the know.
True.
So there's going to be a lot of people out there that are just hunted for this guy.
So if you think it might have been the case where they might have found the guy or something pinged, and then the higher ups had to be like, cut this, all done.
Could be. I don't know. It's highly suggestive that they did not want the John Doe 2 thing pursued.
For whatever reason.
Read into that what you want. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a Fed. It also could mean it's someone else who's not a Fed, that if they got caught, maybe this would put dirt in their face. Because one of the big things is one of the big aspects of this is, I feel like if we're talking about the culpability of the government in relation to OKC, there's multiple levels. In my head, it's the lowest level you have cover up, and all of these things have differing levels of degree to it. Cover up's bulletproof. They fucking covered up. There's no way denying there was a cover up by the Fed boys. Now you take another level. Now there's prior knowledge. So that would be stuff they say they infiltrated the movement. They say they screwed up. They knew it was likely going to happen, and for some reason or another they screwed up. And then there's perpetrating. That's the next level. They actually perpetrated it. So God, I totally lost my point. I was on a roll. My kid walked in the room.
We're going up the levels of what it could have been.
Yeah.
So you're saying the top level of gets more into conspiracy. It's not bulletproof, but it is suggestive.
Yes.
So,
God,
I mean,
no,
the cover up could mean that they were just maybe just trying to cover up for their incompetence.
yes. So okay, that's what I was getting at. I lost my train of thought.
Good job, Brett.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah, the idea
why
is
we
we're
keep you
saying at
around.
like you could justify at the lowest level of like cover up. So like let's say this individual, this John Doe 2 individual, was someone that for some reason or another, if they found him or if they questioned him, maybe they knew he'd had information that would make them look really bad. That's probably the best good faith interpretation I can give of that event. I think, it does look highly suggestive as well that it may have been an out and out informant or an actual Fed or asset or something like that. I don't know. We're in conjecture land when we're dealing with who John Doe 2 is. I don't know.
I feel like you should always start out with incompetence and then just kind of go from there.
Yes.
Build alternate theories from there.
Wait.
We have found Timothy McVeigh. Everything is settled or whatnot, and then cut to newspaper headlines or whatever. Heroic cop commits suicide.
Mhm.
Now let's honor this man and figure out who was this man. How did we get here with him? What led to this? Get into that.
Okay, Yeeky. All right, Yeeky.
Go now.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yes, like we said earlier, Yeeky was one of the first responders. He showed up, saved something like 4 or more people. He actually got injured in the process. I want to say he fell through like a floor or two, kind of like, but I mean, it wasn't anything like too incredibly bad. He did end up in the hospital. I don't know the specifics of the injury, but yes, he did, and he was able to, I think he left the hospital within that day. I think they wanted to keep him longer. That's actually kind of part of the intrigue, is he seemed to want to get out of there. Seemed there were already people asking him questions and stuff. And it seemed to be that whether he saw something or whatever, something pinged for him, or he's like, this ain't right. He was not buying the official narrative. One thing he pointed out, this was in a letter to a lady named Ramona. I don't know if we ever got a last name, or maybe I just don't remember the last name, but there was a letter that was found to this lady named Ramona that was kind of a friend of his. And in it, he talks about how Yeeky himself talks about that, how it was essentially weird that the ATF was already there when he got there. So the feds beat him to it, and they were in full riot gear. And now, mind you, which I guess is a separate point, the ATF was not in the building that day.
That was going to be my question. But we started the podcast describing the building of who was in the building, and that was an ATF office.
Yeah, their office was there. They weren't, which is heavily implies prior knowledge, as I got that earlier.
Because it's not too often that all of them are gone, right? There's always going to be a few people gone, but like not all of them at the same time.
Yes, their excuse was, once it came out, they were out on an all-night surveillance mission the night before, which could have very likely been this, which kind of circles back to prior knowledge. Is there were, I know for a fact, at the courthouse, I want to say it was also at the Murrah building, because I think there was a courthouse across the street or nearby, because there apparently it seems to be they thought maybe there was going to be something happen at the courthouse or at the Murrah building. They weren't entirely sure, but there were eyewitness reports of bomb dogs and like bomb crews, the morning of, kind of very early morning hours, because it seems to be that they thought maybe it was going to happen earlier. But yeah, so they definitely, it seemed to be there was something up there. They seem to have some sort of prior knowledge, because they weren't there, and also there were bomb dogs for sure at the court. I want to say at the Murrah building as well. But yeah, so they're heavily suggestive.
Yeah. Okay. So
he
must have saw something. What do you think he noticed?
Oh, that could be a few things. I guess it's not too much, because he would have shown up after McVeigh already left. But what a lot of people is, for one, the ATF thing. Also it's like you kind of could like wonder what he found out later, because we don't know at what point when he really. It really could have been as simple as he showed up, he saw the ATF there in full riot gear, and was like, how the hell did they beat me? And they're in full riot gear, and this was supposed to be them that got attacked. Weird. But there are one of the other things that a lot of times people get into is secondary explosions, unexploded ordnance as well. That was there because this is actually 100% thing. I believe there are actually even videotapes out there of, they stopped, I believe twice. They called off rescue efforts for unexploded ordnance, unexploded bombs. And what is that? I don't know. Also, there were, because that's one of the big aspects of this. A lot of people, I tend to not lean heavily on this aspect because it's like, you kind of get to a point where you're like, you start going to like bombing experts and it's kind of unprovable, but it
was also like, it was like an ATF building. Who knows what they had stored in there as far as training or what? Like,
yes,
it is a federal building.
Yeah,
like
everyone thinks that the ATF like deals with like mostly guns, but it's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
Mm.
But that does kind of get to the level of like incompetence to like, why are they storing explosives in the same building as a daycare?
Well, the other thing too is the bomb. You said it was ammonium nitrate.
Yes,
but it didn't smell like that. Was that a thing too, or?
Oh, that is. I have heard there are reports, or there were people that said that it didn't really. We get into weird spots there. I'll be honest. I don't know. You kind of get in the weeds there. Once we start trying to interpret the different types of bombs, whether there's, I don't know, that's like bombing expert stuff, but it is supposedly, I believe, that if it was an ammonium nitrate bomb, there'd be a strong smell because ammonium. Have any of you guys ever sniffed ammonia? Like, it smells like cat piss. It's like concentrated cat piss is what it smells like.
I grew up with a farm next to my parents' house. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So, like, supposedly, if it's ammonium nitrate, like, if you're anywhere in the area, it's like supposedly supposed to be so strong it'll gag you. I don't know. I'm not too well versed on the people. I remember coming across that somewhere where there were people saying it didn't seem to do. I don't know. Once we start analyzing bombs, that kind of gets past my.
But that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
But that doesn't matter if that.
When was Yeeky's suicide?
Serendipitous story that happened this morning was that me and my dad were talking about what fertilizer we're put out in our blueberries this year, and we were debating on using a urea nitrate or a ammonium nitrate, and I'm 10 hours into your podcast going, drinking, forgot it. My dad brings up out of nowhere that's what they used in the OKC bombing.
Yeah, it was an ANFO bomb.
Oh shit. And so I jumped on him. I'm like, what do you remember of that? And he was just basically the kind of rundown that we did at the beginning. This
they call it ANFO because it's ammonium nitrate and fuel oil. So it's 95 ammonium nitrate, 5% diesel.
Yeah.
FBI, check out this guy.
you can find the ratio on Wikipedia, I'm pretty sure.
So Yeeky, we are led to believe, we make an announcement that he has killed himself, and then with just a simple autopsy report, why don't you take it away and explain?
I don't even think there was an autopsy conducted, which is one of the
or whatever those medical examiner notes are, or whatever.
Well, the reports of the body. I guess we could skip forward a little bit to the body. The body. He was found, like, his car. I believe his car was found first, actually, and his car was filled with covered in blood, like over 2 pints of blood, I believe is what it says. And the seats were torn apart. I believe there were even burn marks on the floor. It had been torn apart. The doors were locked, which is weird too. And then they find the body later, because obviously once they find the car, then they start going on a manhunt, and they find the body. The lowest estimates is the lowest things I've seen is half a mile, and the highest I've seen is 1.5 miles. I believe I'll be honest. I lean more towards the 1.5 miles. I think I saw somewhere that the half mile was kind of like a. It seems to be that may have been kind of intentionally they went lower, although that doesn't really help once you understand the whole story. Half mile, 1.5 miles really makes no difference because they find the body, and when they find the body, He has cuts all over his throat, cuts all over his wrist. I believe there are other stab marks. There are what look like, from marks from handcuffs, also rope burns. There is grass and dirt in the wounds, which would lead one to think that he was dragged. And then there was a bullet wound to the head at an upward angle, kind of like this, which Yiki was a big old dude. Like, there were some stories of like crazy stuff he'd done, like when he got in some fights. Like, he was a big dude. I think he was like over 6 foot tall. He was a chunky fella, built like an O lineman. Not chunky, I guess it'd be the right way to put him. He's corn fed, that kind of looking guy. This is kind of, and people don't shoot themselves like that. Also, on top of that, you can tell by the between gunshot residue and the way the bullet, the markings right here, that it was not point blank. It was done from a distance. So, who's doing this? That's weird.
Risky.
So, they ruled it a suicide almost immediately. One of the key points to know too is this: they found the body outside the jurisdiction of the police department that he worked for, which was the Oklahoma City Police Department. And the Oklahoma City Police Department almost immediately took over jurisdiction. Not really any reason for it. Makes no sense. They took it over. They ruled it a suicide immediately.
I can think of a reason.
Yeah, I can think of a reason. But
no. So
legitimate. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Sam and Brett, they're in Minnesota. This is mainly Sam's deal, but me and Will, we're in different parts of Georgia. A lot of places in Georgia, they're like unincorporated cities where there's not really, maybe there's like one sheriff deputy or something, but there's no resources there. So the neighboring city can take over for that, I just try to give everything a fair shake, because otherwise,
I don't know. I guess the Oklahoma City Police Department was the larger department. I don't know. I guess I could understand between two different departments. If you're like, hey, this is our guy, we're a larger department, we have better resources. They'd be like, okay, whatever, you take over.
Are the injuries and all the bullet wound and all that stuff? Where did that report come from? Is that bulletproof? Is that widely accepted?
Where specifically that came from? God, actually, that's
a better question would be, does anyone refute that?
Some of the aspects of what I said were refuted, but there's been multiple different reports of, honestly, you kind of stumped me there, but it is I can't remember what the official one is, because I believe they disputed the throat cut. I believe the police department.
There's so many things that were wrong with the body. It doesn't even really matter. If they said the bullet was point blank, why would you shoot it this way into your head? Why would there be grass in your wounds? Why did it look like you were dragged? Why would there even be throat cut marks? It's like there's no way they can doctor this up to mean anything else. You were going to talk about leading up to his death.
Oh, real quick, I do want to go back to the death itself, because what I was kind of leading to is if with all the information I just pointed out, essentially what the story they're trying to get you to believe, by ruling it a suicide, is that he did all this initial damage to himself in his car, and then lost about 2 pints of blood, which I actually just looked up recently how much blood you have to lose before you die. And on the low end, it's 2.5 pints. I think it's 2.5 to 4 or 5. I mean, obviously, probably depends on the person. But either way, he lost. There's 2 pints in the car is what they estimate based on the blood and all that. So, I mean, you can assume he was not in a good state. He also had sickle cell anemia. So there's another thing to it would take far less blood for him to not be in a good state. And so the idea being that he did all this damage, he cut himself all up, I guess wasn't satisfied with the damage he did or whatever, for some reason decided to go on a stroll, in the area that he went to was kind of wooded, and you had to go, it was all through the weird terrain. You had to go over barbed wire fences, everything. It was, decided to go on a half mile to a mile and a half stroll, which you got to think, if you're in that type of physical condition, you're probably, crawling, if that, you're basically dying as is, because you're probably bleeding out. But anyways, he went that far and then decided there to shoot himself in the head. it kind of, it just doesn't make sense, you know. And then also on top of that, all the stuff to his car, the family, I guess you wanted to kind of get into the stuff lead up to it, but at one point too, they returned the car to the family within a day, and still covered in blood, and the family found a knife that was covered in blood stashed under the dash. So like, this is how little the effort they put into, research. It was almost like such incompetence to the point that it felt intentional, like you're being disrespectful to the family. Like, that's how it,
I absolutely.
Am I remembering it correctly too? Like the car was kind of like ripped apart, like they were looking for.
Yeah, and there were looked like there were like small burns on the floor, because that's one of the big things, is that like he clearly was looking into it. He kind of was grabbing documents. It seemed there are things that seemed to imply he had video. So it looked like they were trying to collect stuff from him. Maybe they got documents. It seems to be, if like by judging by the small burn marks, that I doubt they were trying to burn the car, but it looks like they probably like maybe had some sort of documents. They burnt them on the floor or something, So,
yeah.
So what would if there been like, what was he doing that would have been their possible motivation for, potentially offing him?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to it. I mean, it's not explicitly spelled out, because he was pretty tight-lipped. It looks like he, like, for example, there was one thing. God, how do I jumping all over the place is throwing me off. I guess this is good training for tomorrow.
Yes,
but
perfect. Yes.
Yeah. Fuck. All right. What was the question again?
Well, let's just put it this way. So, like leading up to his death, how much longer after did he die? And like, is there anything that happened? It was less than a year.
A little less than a year.
A little less than a year. That's quite a long time, actually.
It is quite a long time, but there definitely was a process, a period of time. Like I said, in the letters, he definitely was saying, and I would highly suggest anyone who's interested in this, go to my series, in the No Way Jose show, go to the OKC playlist, go to episode 7, and if you go to the video description, I put in there. I made a link to an article. And in that article, that's probably the best article I've ever read, the best resource I've found for it. I mean, there are other resources as well. I also put in that there's an interview with his ex-wife, Tanya Yiki, and that there's she did a radio interview that I put that in there as well. But in that, there is the letter to the friend, and in that letter to the friend, it is very clear. He doesn't explicitly spell out everything he's doing, what's going on, but he very clearly was not buying the narrative. He even heavily implied that there was, I guess it depends on how you want to interpret how he said it, but that essentially the feds fucked up and that they were covering it up, essentially.
Yeah.
Or, depending on how you want to interpret what he's saying, I guess you could say that the feds did it on purpose, depending on how you interpret. But I interpreted what he was saying as the feds, maybe they had infiltrated and they let it happen. And when he says like let it happen, I think they mean more like maybe they fucked up or or something like that. And he was implying, and now they're trying to get us to kind of cover for it. That letter is kind of where you can kind of see where he's coming from.
There's a good chance he knows stuff that we'll never even know.
Maybe. I mean, there are some research. I don't know the specifics of this, but there were researchers in the past that looked in this that were pretty credible. That it said they had semi-credible stuff that looks like he may have gotten a hold of a surveillance video. Which that's another big aspect of this story is there was like the surveillance videos just magically disappeared. There was, it's confirmed through, I believe, FBI documents. They may have gotten like from FOIA, I believe, Freedom of Information Act. Or this may have been something Trent dude got out from his FOIA lawsuits, kind of like pried it from them. But there was like over 20. Actually, you know what? I think this was Danny Coulson, former FBI agent. I don't remember. It could be all of them, one of the two, or one of them. But they found there was over 20. Surveillance videos of the area. And I believe it was like 2 or 3 at least that were confirmed that actually saw the truck and all that, like saw the, the pertinent information. Like, so, and that's where you get into like For one, if you want to go the explosive route, you would be able to, if there was a surveillance, assuming we're going to go that there was something fucky with the explosives, those surveillance videos would pick it up. But the angle that I would, lean into more is the John Doe 2, because John Doe 2 was, seen by eyewitnesses in the Ryder truck with McVeigh. So if we had a surveillance tape that saw him, he would have been in the passenger seat, because that was the eyewitnesses described McVeigh in the driver's seat, John Doe 2 in the passenger seat. So that would probably be the biggest thing, is John Doe 2.
Do we know who John Doe 2 is?
Nope.
I mean, there's a lot of saying it's John Doe. God, Sam.
Conjecture. There's a lot of conjecture one way or the other, because there are a lot of different actors throughout the story. A lot of people thought Richard Lee Guthrie was, which, I mean, I don't know, maybe. I don't know. But
who else suicided themselves?
Trying to do was another one. Kenneth Trying to do.
Well, it's his story.
Yeah, his story. He
go now. Tell us all now.
Quick, let's say this is practice for Dave. Come on.
Kenneth Trying to do. Now Kenneth Trying to do. He was a. How do I start with his story? Where do I want to start? Kenneth Trying to do.
He looks like a real ass dude.
Yeah, he does look like a real ass dude. He looks cool as shit. I'm not gonna lie.
America, fuck
yeah. I look at him, I'm like, dude, I could rock with that dude.
That looked like every single one of my dad's friends growing up. Like,
he looks like a dope ass biker dude. Like,
he is an every other weekend dad at best, man. Like,
yeah, I believe he did a bit of time in the military during like the whole Vietnam stuff. He got out. He developed a heroin addiction. He, he ended up robbing a bank at some point. I believe it was a botched bank robbery, so it's not even like he pulled it off. And then he got busted for that, did his jail time. He got out, was on parole. He got his life back together, got married, had a kid. And then at one point he was coming back from Mexico. And his wife was Mexican. So I don't know the specifics of why he was there, but I would assume being as his wife was Mexican, they probably had something to do with family or something like that. But he was coming back from Mexico. He got stopped at the border, and they got him for parole violation, because he had been on parole for a while, and back to him being a real ass dude. He was pretty good about his parole stuff, and then his parole officer was like, "I don't want you to drink." For some reason, his parole officer had a weird thing about he didn't want his parolees to drink alcohol, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna drink alcohol." And I guess that his brother was Jesse Trendu, who was a lawyer, tried to help him fight the terms of the parole, see if there's ways they can work around it. No avail. Basically was like, no, you can't drink. And he's kind of like, well, all right, well, I mean, I'm just going to stop showing up because you guys are going to
this is America,
because you're going to take my piss and there's going to be alcohol in it. So, he like kind of just straight up was like, yeah, we're not doing that. And then, so just kind of, it was kind of a parole violation thing. And, so he got for that. They pulled him in for it, but here's the catch, dude. Once again, with the John Doe 2 thing, he fit multiple of the different aspects of John Doe 2. If you look at the John Doe 2 sketch, you can kind of see it. Also, a lot of people thought Richard Lee Guthrie was John Doe 2, which I alluded to earlier, which is one of the kind of characters loosely associated with McVeigh. So he kind of had a very similar build. The other thing is he had a dragon tattoo on his left forearm, which a lot of people might be like, hear that and be like, well, then maybe he was John Doe 2. Okay, like if you look at the dragon tattoo, you gotta remember it's the 90s. It was very much a generic looking tattoo. Like if you see the
real ass dude.
Yeah, he's a real ass dude. Like this is probably some flash art stuff. He's like, that looks fucking dope. I'm getting that. So, and obviously when they say dragon tattoo, they didn't know exactly perfectly looks like. So some other dude probably had some other 90s looking dragon tattoo. He also, he was driving a similar pickup truck that they were under the understanding John Doe 2 may have tried to escape in. He was coming back from Mexico, and so the feds were under the belief that maybe John Doe 2 probably either tried to escape to Canada or Mexico, so that would be one of the spots that they would probably find him. He also had bank robbery on his record, which John Doe 2 or McVeigh was associated with a group of bank robbers loosely. That's kind of non-official narrative thing because they try to shy away from that one because that opens up a whole other bag of worms for them. But
it almost sounds old-timey.
Yeah, bank
Like-
robbery, right? Yeah,
Yeah, he's hanging out with a band of bank robbers.
yeah.
I was just thinking he's the guy with the dragon tattoo. But go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good one. These uncultured swine don't get it. But yeah, no. So he fit a lot of the parameters of John Doe 2. So they took him, for this parole violation, and for some reason they decided to send him to Oklahoma City, which there was a federal transfer center there. And so they brought him there, and they ended up putting him in one of the protective units there. The I believe they call it the SHU, super. I don't know what the hell it stands for. But essentially, essentially was like kind of one of those areas where they kept like Epstein, kind of the idea of like extra protection. You're not supposed it's supposed to be. I believe you could even request it. I don't remember the specifics, but essentially it was weird. He ended up there because he was a model prisoner. There's not really any reason for it. But anyways, they sent to that point, and then nope, lo and behold, he ended up dead. I would suggest people out there actually literally just self-published an article of that today. So you go to my Twitter. I literally just made the Substack today. It's No Way Jose 2020 Substack, whatever. I don't even know how the address. I probably got to figure that out so I can plug it better. But
It's on
I don't know if
Twitter.
it's substack.com/No Way Jose 2020. I don't know, but if you go figure it out.
This is all the broad strokes to drive everyone to your channel to really get in depth and to get all like because we're trying to I know you're really only mentioning stuff that is provable for the most part. We just don't need to get into all the gritty details about that.
It's No Way Jose, sorry. 2020 Substack, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he ended up dead. There's a lot of weird stuff with the body. Like, apparently they were trying to cremate it. They were trying to like forego the family's approval. They literally tried to get the medical examiner to sign off on a cremation. He was like, no. Yeah, I think they actually called the family first and was like, hey, wants to cremate it? And they're like, no. And then they tried to get the medical examiner and be like, cremate it. And they're like, no. And then eventually the family got the body after it took them a while. And when they received the body, there were like cuts, bruises, weird ligature marks on him. And the story was to them that he had hung himself, with a bed sheet in there, which in an area you're not supposed to be. There's supposed to be video. So that it gets a lot into the weeds there. Anyways, trying to think where I want to go take this next. Then so they find sorry.
This is
Let
practice.
me ask you, like on this, on this
The
trail
burden of
here,
having so much information. Like,
Yeah.
did this guy get off just because like he fit the profile and was just thrown up as a John Doe 2? And then like, what was the reasoning, in your opinion, for killing him?
I think if I had to guess, I believe it was an interrogation that went wrong. Like they probably thought he was John Doe 2. And this is another, once again, to the FBI is not a monolith. This is a point Richard Booth brought up because like he brought that because they're like, I believe someone asked him about it or something. It's kind of like, well, wouldn't they know or whatever? It's like, well, I think, once again, I think with the FBI, it's not a monolith. They're not all operating off the same information. So there probably were feds out there who thought he was John Doe 2, had some level of information. Maybe they thought maybe they did have more information. They just mistook him for their guy, thought he was lying, whatever. I don't know. I think it was an interrogation gone wrong. Oh, I remember where I kind of wanted to bring this. There was also, I believe it was 2 inmates who attested to the fact that they, that were like kind of, in cells nearby. They attested to his brother Jesse that they heard screams and sounds that sounded like kind of torture, and both of them ended up dead as well. One of another suicide, one of a drug overdose.
Holy cow!
Yeah, that Richard Lee Guthrie fellow I told you about as well. He also ended up dead. This ended up like shortly after him.
Is he the guy that sold guns with McVeigh?
Did they all know Hillary Clinton?
Yeah. Richard Lee Guthrie. God, I'm trying to remember Richard Guthrie. I'm drawing a blank right now.
Here's my impression of Jose right now.
But yeah, no. Richard Lee Guthrie was one of the other Aryan bank like guys that was kind of like with him with the bank robberies and stuff. So he was probably in the know of a lot of the stuff that was going on. You may or may not have known John Doe 2. The thing with him that's weird is he right before he died, I want to say it was Newsweek, but some major publication, he said he was going to blow the lid off of it, and then lo and behold, like I believe, shortly after he ends up dead before he can do that interview, he also was writing his like kind of his whole expose or story or whatever, and then he died. Keep in mind this is a guy they probably confused Kenneth Trentadue with. So that kind of maybe makes you think why they fucking maybe probably killed Kenneth, thinking maybe it was him, thinking this guy had more information than he had. But yeah, also there was a videographer. Back up a little bit, because this is kind of when Kenneth's brother Jesse starts digging, because I mentioned earlier Jesse, Kenneth's brother, is a lawyer, and he still to this day is fighting this fight, but Jesse, I always mix the two guys up, Kenneth and Jesse. But Jesse, I guess there was a guy named Norman Pearl who, came to Jesse and he told him that what happened was this Norman Pearl guy was a expert videographer. He was actually like the expert one of the experts in the Rodney King case. So he's kind of like well known for this. I guess the FBI came to him and brought him like I don't remember specifically what they brought. They kind of brought him the video evidence essentially of the night, and were kind of like showed him. I don't remember specifics because I'm kind of really a tech guy, so I don't know how this works. They essentially asked his expert opinion about the fact that there was no there was no video footage of that night, and asked him essentially like, if is this, in your expert opinion, is this like manually, would this have to have been done manually? Is there any other way that it couldn't have been, essentially? Like, what's your expert opinion? And they were very insistent on no written report. They wanted an oral report. And according to this Norman Pearl guy, they did not what they he told them that that would have to be done manually. That essentially the video would have had to be, that's how it disappeared. It would have had to be done manually. And they basically told him like, hey, don't talk about this, just forget this ever happened, blah, blah, blah. And then he went to Jesse and was kind of like, hey, I'll testify. He also died, although to be fair, he died of a heart attack. But to add to that, I believe I need to look into it. I believe there are ways to induce heart attacks. So it's not outside the
getting vaccinated.
Yeah, it's not outside the realm of possibility that there could have been something there. But
I just want to say everything you're telling us, I don't believe any of it. And I'm not going to tell anyone about it if you're a Fed watching this. So don't suicide me.
Yes. So he died.
No, I'm just...
I was gonna say I have heard theories of the intelligence agencies having things like heart attack guns. Even though that sounds wild, like I wouldn't put it past them to possess such things.
You can give people stuff that gives them a heart attack.
Yes. I don't remember what,
crazy.
But I know there is and I want to say it's actually pretty common stuff. Like I need to look it up one of these days, because that is pretty common. There's some like commonly used thing, I believe, that can induce heart attacks in enough amount or something like that. I want to say it's like epinephrine or something, but I might be wrong. I don't know, but
I mean that would do it.
Oh yeah. I believe it.
Yeah. So yeah, I believe there are ways to induce heart attacks, so it's possible. I don't know. I mean, it's also possible the one guy OD'd. The one guy also killed himself too, also in that area, where he shouldn't be able to kill himself. And then also this guy had a heart attack. I don't know, but it just gets suspicious when a bunch of bodies start piling up that, seem to be in spots where they would have really helped this case out. So,
and it was in an era too, where there was a lot harder to spread information. So it was easier for them to get away with such brash actions.
Yeah.
They couldn't pull that shit off today if these were intentional acts.
I think it'd be a lot harder to pull off today. But although I will say they got pretty decent media coverage. I think the Trentadue story, I don't know if it was 60 Minutes, 2020 at some point, one of those kind of things. Or they were on maybe local news. I don't know. They got some sort of news coverage. But, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was just a blip, and then it just kind of got relegated as like, oh, what? I don't know what that is. That's weird, and moved on,
So, real big picture, why do you think all of this happened? Like, was there a big overall intention, like just say it was intentional by like feds or elites or whatever you want to call it? Like, what do you think the whole reasoning behind all of this was?
Well, if we're gonna be if we're putting on the conspiracy hat here and saying
Yep, for sure.
we're taking the assumption that it was intentionally done, this would be essentially Northwood stuff. They also, a lot of times people refer to it as Gladio. It's the strategy of tension is what they call it too as well, where the idea is, because a lot of people be like, well, why would they do this? Because like people have this idea of like you do this one thing and then you get this like they see it in this like one-dimensional way of like, if this entity, this larger entity, perpetrates some sort of false flag, it doesn't make sense to them if there's not some sort of direct action after that is like their reward, the evil actor's reward in the end. But that's not how these things work. It's a big picture thing. And by the way, Gladio, where that term comes from, this has happened in other countries. Essentially, the whole Operation Northwoods thing. Gladio, I believe, primarily happened in like Italy and other places in kind of like that area in Europe, where this was a thing. Like this, totally
it's been proven. It's been actually proven. Look up Operation Gladio; it'll blow your mind.
I think Booth covers it in your. I think it's in episode 1. I think
one
Booth
of the
gets
early
into
episodes,
it. Yeah.
I don't know if it was the first one initially.
One or two, yeah.
Yeah, one of the first couple. But yeah, Gladio, and this is the whole point. They'd also did it in Vietnam. It was called Operation Phoenix. But the idea being that they do acts of terror, and it's not the idea of that we're looking for this one tangible thing that happens after. It's the idea that you're driving the energy the way you want it to.
Mm-hmm.
You're driving them towards the security state. You're making your enemies look bad. Like if we're going to assume that OKC was a Gladio operation, think about the result. Like if you're trying to look
people
at
in a level of fear.
Yeah,
to justify the security state.
Yeah, you also like essentially discredited the entire militia movement, which was big at that time.
Yeah.
You know? So like this was in the wake of Ruby Ridge and Waco.
Right.
Yes, you may not have gotten some specific I don't know, gun bill or whatever immediately after, but you got to think about the big picture and
94 assault weapons ban.
Yeah. So
what do you if we take do you think Ruby Ridge happened and then
Ruby
Waco?
Ridge.
Ruby Ridge. Do you think
Say it 5 times, Sam?
Yeah. Do you think like everyone thinks Ruby Ridge was a failure and then they tried to fix it with Waco and that was a failure and then we get the Oklahoma bombing? What's your perspective on all of that?
I mean, I'm not going to assert that it was a Gladio, but like, even if you look at it of like how they frame the narrative afterwards, yes, that was kind of their way to like, even if we say that like the whole OKC thing was completely organic, like hell, we could even say that the feds had nothing to do with it, which I mean, it's provable that they were at least infiltrated these movements and were, at the very least they fucked up, like, but let's say that even they were not even involved whatsoever. Just the way they framed the narrative and how this played out. Yeah, that was essentially their way of kind of like, and this is a common point Scott Horton uses when he talks about OKC, is he'd be like, now you get to kind of retroactively like change the narrative of like things like Waco to the general public and kind of be like, oh, well, see, it was kind of almost like, look, we were right. Look at these crazies. Like these militia movement, like, what are you, Timothy McVeigh? Like, like it's that kind of thing.
And back then it wasn't as easy to look up like what David Koresh was all about back then in the 90s,
right,
as it is now.
Does it seem like maybe they got it wrong, and then they finally got it right? Because it seems like with OKC, like they did a better job of setting the narrative of like this terrorist did this terrible thing, and then this is why we need a bigger security state. Whereas they kind of tried that with Waco, and it kind of like they set a narrative, but it was a lot harder, and a lot of people, like them putting the sign out there, God save us, we want the press and stuff like that, and I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Like if I had to look at it, like if they're like, I don't know, even if we're trying to give the best faith interpretations, it's almost like they fucked up there. They botched those. Even if you're like. Even if you don't go too much deeper, just the idea of that, say with Waco, they went in there, like, obviously that was a complete PR disaster. Like there's really hard to spin that. And I guess I say that, I guess it's not entirely true. Cause I feel like even then you talk to normies a lot of times, now or like a decade ago. A lot of people look at like the Waco and kind of like, but even then, it still kind of looks bad. It wasn't good PR from them. There wasn't really a good way to frame that for them. It just looked bad.
Waco's a good intro if you're trying to red pill some people. Like,
yeah.
It's hard to discredit
watch Waco
killing
Rules
children.
of Engagement.
Yeah.
Waco
the
Rules
new
of
one?
Engagement.
Ugh. Is that the new one?
No, that's the old one Scott Horton always references.
Oh, okay, yeah, there was
I know
someone that
it's good.
dropped on Netflix recently.
It's not good.
A lot of people are talking about, no, that is like official narrative bullshit. Like
John Leguizamo's in it. Is that the
which
one?
I will say
that one's
No,
good.
that's the drama one that was on like Spike, and then Netflix picked it up. No, this is like a new like an actual documentary.
my friend Derek.
I don't trust any documentaries I see on Netflix. So
right, my friend Derek and his wife watched it, and he was telling me about how it like really red pilled him, and I was like, you watched the wrong one, but still, at
least it piqued his interest though. Like it got him. It was an entry to the rabbit hole.
But it's like even like the narrative is still fucked up, like they couldn't
you
spin
can't
it any
spin it
better
in a
than
good
that.
way. How many people died in that?
Children died.
Incident?
They murdered children. How do you get around that?
Yeah, I mean,
so there's this big popular guy that was just indicted, I think today, and he put on Twitter that it ties in with OKC and sort of how you view the world after studying it.
Yeah.
Wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Oh, I said I wouldn't elaborate. I don't know if you saw the follow-up tweet. No, obviously, when I say I will not elaborate, I mean like in Twitter world, because it's like I don't know. People like try to get elaborate. And, like I don't.
Will told me to pull that tweet up for comedic relief. I was too lazy.
No, for real though. Like you look at, it's like I don't know. I guess for me now, like it is kind of like you start noticing patterns and stuff, and it's like and like if you start looking at things like, say for example the Whitmer thing. If you guys look back at that, like when did that happen? That happened like peak lockdown, and it almost seemed like that was their way of they were almost attempting, reframing the whole COVID thing of like that way they could like look at these right-wing crazies against this super COVID governor. Like that's kind of way I see it now. Like I struggle to see what. I mean, maybe they're just that inept, the royal those that sit above us in shadow when it comes to like the this Trump indictment thing. I just can't see how this works out well for them unless, and you play it back to January 6th. What was January 6th? January 6th was their attempt to do a almost like an OKC light. Obviously no one really got hurt, but they were trying to reframe it of like, look at these crazies trying to take over the government. And like it was their way of trying to reframe it, in my opinion. And this email seems like a second attempt at that almost. Is like what I'm just saying to people: be on the lookout, because they're going to frame this as like I think Trump already said something once about like, hey, protest this, and like I'm not necessarily saying he was wrong there, but the point is they're going to take that, and all they got to do is find a way to infiltrate movements, and if they can pull it off just right, I mean, especially if they want, I don't know if they have the balls to go as far as something like an OKC or something now.
Not anymore, I don't think.
Because I feel like they'd be, I don't know if they could pull it off, but if they did, be on the lookout, or even something light like another January 6th. I'm just saying, like, the only way I see them getting something resembling a win is something along those lines. Maybe not a full-on domestic terrorism thing, but maybe something light, like some sort of acts of violence, or some sort of something that's almost like a metaphorical thing to normal people, like a because I think they were trying to play off people's like, oh my God, like the hallowed halls of government with a January 6th thing, I think is almost what they were probably trying to go for. Like they tried to take over the government, but I mean, obviously I'm not trying to say I know exactly what angle they would go with, but the point being is like, I don't know. This seems like a perfect opportunity for some sort of actors to gin up something. And it doesn't mean they have to like even necessarily do it themselves. I'd suggest people read Trevor Arison's book, Terror Factory, which like kind of goes into a lot of how like informants operate, especially this is more particularly in, written in the context of like the war on terror and how they took, like Middle Eastern people and would like, they would fuck with them, where they would do stuff where they'd be like, hey, I see you're trying to come over to the United States, and you're trying to become a citizen, or you're trying to come over on a visa. Guess what? We want you to be an informant, and if you don't, we'll deport you. But if you do, we'll give you money, and all we want you to do is to get information this guy. Or they'll find some hapless dude that's like down on his luck, and they'll be like, oh, you hate the government? Hey, look at this intricate plan I have and all these resources I have. All you have to do is literally follow this exact plan I give you and press this button or whatever. And,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And then, okay. Exactly. Do it. Yeah. So, it's like, I guess technically they didn't actually perpetrate anything. They didn't really I guess in a theoretical sense, that guy, I guess, would have done that. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm just saying, be on the lookout for that sort of thing.
Like distrust everything, but verify.
Yes.
Well, I will say, like, even if to not, they could do that as not as the, how do I want to put this? If you read in the newspaper, Homeland Security finds Middle Eastern man that blah, 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 I'd be willing to bet a lot of those stories tend to drop right around the time they're trying to pass the budget, And so it's just like, we got to fund these people. Look at what they're doing.
They used to be their playbook, but I feel like it's getting harder and harder for them to pull these things off.
Yes, especially when people are. This is kind of why it's like it's almost like with my coverage of like the OKC stuff, and it's like, and then the point I was kind of getting at with CNN covering, it's like, it's striking a chord. Even if like me and like CNN, like we had no influence over each other, there clearly is like it's almost like a raising of the consciousness of the public almost. We're like,
you throw things out into the ether, and then you'll see it bubble up, weeks or months down the road. Like
the zeitgeist.
Especially if you have a little bit of reach, who knows? Like the right person could hear it and then amplify that signal. I mean, it's the information age is nuts.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add, Jose?
No. I mean, obviously there's so much more, but I've done like 10 hours on it. There's so many different other angles I can go on, but I don't know. Yeah, no, this was good. We kind of jumped all over the place. You kind of threw me through the crucible. Went about this in the most all
this
over
was
the way.
Like OKC for dummies.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say, like, this is part 1. We're gonna have 10 more episodes,
and just keep drilling on different aspects and jumping in different parts. All right, now tell the end. Now tell the middle. Now tell the beginning.
Welcome to ADD.
Watching Quentin Tarantino movies.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
No, dude, this was awesome, man, and
fun.
you made us smarter, bro.
Yeah,
like
I try.
Yeah,
with this shit. Like,
I know we jumped around a lot, but it was fun because
no, it was good. It kept me on my toes.
hell yeah, dude. Well, like, good luck on a problem, when it comes up and all that kind of shit.
I'll definitely be checking that out. Is that gonna be live?
No, it's not a live stream, but I think I don't know. It might be live to Gas Digital. I don't know. I think right now the Gas Digital guys, a lot of them are out on vacation in Jamaica.
Yeah, the whole staff, all the staff.
So everybody. I don't know. I think that might affect the live stream aspect of Gas Digital. So I don't know. It may live stream to Gas Digital. I thought they live streamed to Gas Digital. I know.
Not part of the problem.
Oh no! Even when I had a Gas Digital subscription, I never watched the live stream, so I don't know. But yeah, well, I mean, obviously it'll be up on gasdigital.com probably early. I mean, will be tomorrow, Friday. Will be recorded, so I would guess it'll probably be up on Gas Digital either that night or the following day. And if I had to assume, I think it'll probably drop publicly on his YouTube channel, probably, and probably all like his audio podcatchers, probably like Sunday or something, if I had to guess. Yeah. I don't know the specifics. Obviously, it's not me doing it.
I just want to say, like, we all appreciate all your work that you put into this. This is a subject that needs a lot more attention. I know I was, for that image I was making and everything, like, one of the images that popped up when I typed in Terrence Hickey was that sweatshirt you showed us at the beginning. So it's like, it's starting to get out there, and we appreciate heroic people like yourself. So,
oh well, thanks. I try. I mean, I think heroic might not be the right way to put it, but
Scott Horton
said it. Yeah, so
that's right.
That's right. Yeah.
But no, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I guess for those who want to follow my work, you can find me on YouTube, all the major odd podcasts. I'm on Aussie. Also, it's the No Way Jose show, particularly the OKC. It'll be easiest if you're trying to do the OKC stuff. Honestly, the easiest way for you to go is YouTube. Although I guess if you're like, I know like on Spotify, there's a search function. I don't know about the other audio podcasts. Like I've been listening to my stuff on Spotify. You can go type into the search bar OKC when you're on my thing, and then it'll bring up all of them. Or you can go to YouTube, go to the playlist, the OKC playlist, and it'll bring up all of them because they are like at different points. It's not like I was like episode, 230 of No Way Jose, 231, 232. Like it's not sequential, so they were kind of like whenever we got them. So the playlist might be easiest, or just search OKC in whatever podcatcher you're using. But yeah, I did just drop a Substack article today. So on the Kenneth Trying to Do thing. So go check that out. Share it around if you can. If you enjoy it, you can follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose. You want to give me money? Patreon.com/Jose2020. I like money. But
Yeah, we're capitalists, man.
But yeah, I can't think of anything else. I think that's all I got right now. I appreciate you guys having me on. This was fun. Yeah, it was it definitely kept me on my toes. Probably was a good practice for tomorrow, so that's good.
Yeah, tomorrow probably will go a lot smoother.
You'll be dealing with professionals.
and then one interviewer too, not just 4 dudes with ADD.
I appreciate it.
Well, I guess that's it for this broadcast. Man, like that was super great. Now we're gonna go to the Patreon, and I'll discuss which school shootings were false flags.
All of them. No,